Hey, everybody, welcome home, where we provide inspiration, information, and motivator after motivator after motivator here on America's Next. We have my main man, Stephen Cleary here. How you doing, Stephen?
I'm good, Cedric. How are you, man? Long time no see.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, I thought about you, and I wanted to have a discussion with you today because I think that you're doing something great out there, and you've embarked in agriculture, and we're going to talk about that today. How's it going for you?
Man, life is real good right now, man. We finally have gotten to spring, so the garden's really starting to take off. Everything is in full swing right now. Everything is full blown, really.
Wow. And what's that look like? I know back in the winter, you were sapping trees. Is that correct?
Yeah. So my big moneymaker here at the farm right now is my maple syrup production. So. Okay. That is a super short part of the year. So the maple sap only runs in a real short time between right when winter ends and right before spring begins. So it's kind of when you have the nights are above freeze, or the nights are below freezing and the days are above freezing. When you have those big temperature swings, that's when the trees are starting to wake up, and that's when the sap is starting to flow. So sometimes it's a 3-week season, sometimes it's a 6-week season. It really depends on what the weather is doing. This year, we had about 4 weeks of good sap flow, and it's hot and heavy when it's going.
Wow. Do you have other people to help you with all this stuff, or you do it yourself?
For the most part, I do it myself. Fortunately, my parents live pretty close to me, and my dad is retired at this point, and he's into doing these same kind of projects like I am too. So I do get a lot of help from him. I get some help from some friends and stuff that want to come over and see what I'm doing, but for the most part, it's a solo undertaking.
Wow. When did you talk? Let's slow it down a little bit. I'm so excited to talk to you about the ins and outs of what it is that you're doing, because, like I said, we find that social media is a way of seeing what other people is doing. And when I realized that you were planning to get a farm, my mind was blown, because I'm thinking, this man right here, he gets it. He's thinking from a futuristic perspective about the things that he's putting in his body and the things that he's putting in his family's body. Talk to me a little bit about your upbringing. How did you grow up?
So really, I'm a suburban kid. I grew up in suburban Cincinnati, born and raised. So the whole farm life thing, this is brand new to me. I never, other than, maybe some tomato plants and some pots on the back porch with my mom as a kid, I never raised a garden, never raised animals, never really even had pets or anything. Mm-hmm. So I kind of just, a couple of years ago, I started getting to the point where it's like, okay, I'm ready to make that next step in life. I'm ready to go and buy a house. I wanted to get a little bit of land. I wasn't necessarily looking for a farm. I was looking for, I guess you could say, more of like a homestead type situation where maybe I could have, a small vegetable garden. I could have a couple of chickens, something like that. I've always kind of been interested in a more self-sustaining lifestyle, I guess you could say. But the farm thing just kind of happened by accident, really.
Really? Did you? I mean, did your mother grow vegetables or plants? Did your father do anything in the yard?
My mom was real big. She always has kept beautiful flower gardens. So I suppose that's a little bit where the green thumb kind of comes from. Mm-hmm. We did a couple of years, we would do little small vegetable gardens, maybe like an 8x8 raised bed, and just do, simple things like tomatoes and peppers, but nothing ever really beyond like, we're having hamburgers tonight. Let's go out and see if we have a tomato,
Right. Yeah. Okay. What elementary school did you go to, if you don't mind me asking?
I went to Lakeside Elementary, with K-6 for the neighborhood that I grew up in.
Okay. And did you guys do any sort of agricultural products there?
Not that I can remember. I mean, maybe, the plant some grass seed inside of a pantyhose and draw a face on it and give it a haircut, maybe something like that. Maybe like a little bean project, something like that. But I can't ever really recall doing any, trying to grow food or anything like that, really.
Okay. All right. Now, were you one of those kids who, when you go to the farm, would think, wow, that's interesting?
Oh, for sure. Probably as a kid, probably more so about the animals than about the the raising the fruits and the vegetables, or like on a larger scale farm, like that do like monocrops and that kind of stuff that, are hundreds and hundreds of acres of corn or soybeans or that kind of thing. I wasn't ever so much interested in that part, but what little kid doesn't love seeing some ghosts running around or getting chased by a rooster or, that kind of thing.
Hey, one time I got chased by a deer, and it wasn't as funny. It wasn't as funny as I thought it would be, because it's like, I got a live animal coming at me. Another time, some kids invited me to go check out a farm, which was in this neighborhood I lived in, and I peeked into the barn hole, and there was a huge horse. I mean, at the time, I thought it was huge. Like, his eyeball was probably like this big. Yeah. I was like terrified. So, it's a brave thing that you get into when you decide to raise animals and live that sort of a lifestyle. Now, do you have animals on your farm as well?
At this point, I have chickens that they're all egg-laying chickens. They're not meat chickens. Those are actually two different things. So I have a organic farm fresh egg business that I'm operating. Wow. And then at this point, the only other animals I have, there are a couple of old tomcats that live out in my barn that try to help me deal with the mice.
Okay. Hey, everybody, we have the president of the network in the building, Ari Himes, and happy to see you here too as well today. Can you talk to me a little bit about the egg business? What's that look like, and how does it work?
So a little over a year ago, we'll call it maybe 16 months ago or so, I got my first set of 10 chickens. Everything that I've done out here at the farm, I've tried to start small scale. I am the kind of person that I love to jump into stuff with both feet. And sometimes that's a great thing, and sometimes that's not a great thing. So I have been trying to dial that back a little bit with my farm projects and make sure that I test the waters first to make sure that this is something that I want to do. I didn't want to go out and buy 40 chickens and then all of a sudden I find out, well, I don't have the time or the desire to deal with 40 chickens.
Wow.
So I got a small batch of 10 chickens, egg-laying chickens, and my dad and I, we built a chicken coop, and you don't realize until you start this sort of thing. Chickens almost lay an egg a day. So
really,
I get from those 10 birds, I was getting almost 80 to 90 eggs a week. So what started out as something that was going to be, okay, I just want to do this for me, for my family. I don't want them to have to buy eggs anymore. I want them to have these nice organic farm fresh eggs, turned into, well, all of a sudden I have 6 dozen eggs sitting on my countertop. I need to find something to do with them. And more and more here of late, I think people are becoming more aware or want to become more aware of where their food comes from. Mm-hmm. And through, like you mentioned, through social media, I like to do a lot of self-promotion, I guess you could call it, through my social media. I had lots of people reaching out to me, well, do you have any eggs for sale? And so it didn't really start out with the idea of being a business, but it kind of morphed into that just through people being curious and asking about it.
Right. Farming and agriculture is one of the first businesses ever. And it gives way to all sorts of barter, relationships, and overall stimulation of the neighborhood. So the farm itself is actually an anchor, when you look at what our community's doing, how our community's growing, and the overall health of our community. And so it's no small undertaking that you've decided to get into. How do you package the eggs?
Everybody that I know keeps their egg cartons for me. So
wow, okay.
You don't, at this point, you don't know. You might get a Meyer egg carton, you might get a Kroger egg carton, and I'm just going to slap my little sticker on it.
Right.
But something that a lot of people don't know, with farm fresh eggs, they do not have to be refrigerated. When a chicken lays an egg, it has a natural coating on it that it doesn't need to be refrigerated. The reason that store-bought eggs have to be refrigerated is because they've been washed already. Because as you can imagine, when a chicken lays an egg, it's not always necessarily going to come out the cleanest looking.
Right.
So when you get that store-bought egg, that's been washed already. So that's why the store-bought eggs have to be refrigerated. So my eggs, I do not refrigerate because at the volume that I get them, I don't have the space in my refrigerator to store them until I can get them out to the people. So I always just make sure that I explain to new customers that, hey, you can keep these out on your counter if you would like to, But if you would like to refrigerate them, if you'd like them to look, pretty and clean, you can go ahead and wash them, but then they need to go in the refrigerator.
Wow. How long can they sit without being washed?
About 5 weeks.
Are you kidding me? I knew that we were in for a dynamic show today, but I didn't know it would be this dynamic. I grew up reading all different sorts of fact books, and I love small digestible facts. And it's like every few sentences out of your mouth about this farm is another digestible fact. So
these last 2 years have been an outrageous learning experiment. I did not know anything about any of this stuff before I moved out here. I didn't know how to make maple syrup. I didn't really know how to grow vegetables. I didn't know how to raise chickens. It's just kind of been trial and error and lots of reading and lots of YouTube videos.
Right. Wow. So what sorts of vegetables do you grow?
This year, I really expanded. So I'm doing a lot of different stuff this year. I'm doing 5 or 6 different varieties of tomatoes, a whole bunch of different varieties of sweet and spicy peppers, doing cucumbers, doing beans, carrots, asparagus, spinach, lettuce, onions, cabbages, broccoli. I'm sure I'm forgetting some stuff, but yeah, there's all kinds of stuff going on out in my garden this year.
Really? And with what type of square footage? How many square feet are you using to grow your produce alone?
My vegetable garden is 60 by 60 feet by 60 feet.
Okay. All right. And is that a substantial space, or is that like more than enough space?
That's a pretty good size. I do not use every inch of it. That's for sure.
Okay. All right. And how long have you been growing vegetables there?
This is my second season. No, this is my third season. Excuse me, third season.
Okay. Do you find that, every season you get a little bit better with your returns on your produce?
100%. So that's one of the things that I notice with the things that I've done year after year is I'm just as much learning the things that I want to do again as I'm learning the things that I don't want to do again.
Right. Talk about something that you don't want to do again.
Oh man, so the name of the game in growing vegetables for me is weed suppression. Weeds are your number one enemy because the weeds are going to grow better than what your vegetables are going to grow. The first year that I did my garden, I did not do anything for weed prevention. And I spent my entire summer pulling weeds, trying to push a lawnmower through my garden. I mean, I could not win the battle.
Okay.
Last year, I implemented some new things. I did a lot of mulching. When you mulch around your vegetables, around your plants, the weeds don't get as good as sunlight, so they have a harder time perking up to the surface. And when they do perk up to the surface, since they aren't getting good sunlight when they're developing, their roots don't develop, so they pluck out super easy.
Okay.
And then this year, I moved on. I've also incorporated some tarping. So I am using a permeable plastic tarp that lets the water through, but doesn't really let the sunlight through, and nothing can grow up through it. So This year, I just decided I'm winning the weed battle.
Yeah, there you go. Now, how much food do you get out of a 60 by 60 lot?
A lot.
Right.
So it probably would be easier for me if I described it in a little bit smaller scale. And then we could extrapolate that out into the scale that I'm on. But if a person wanted to start like a beginner's garden, right? Probably the 4 easiest vegetables would be tomatoes, zucchinis, pole beans, and potatoes. So with those,
say that one more time for the audience.
Tomatoes, zucchini, pole beans, and potatoes.
A pole bean?
A pole bean. So there's 2 varieties of beans. There's a bush bean and there's a pole bean. These are green beans.
Okay.
A pole bean grows on a vine and it climbs a pole.
Okay.
A bush bean stands on its own in a bush, but they don't yield as high as a pole bean.
Okay.
So if you had a 10 by 10 area in your garden, that was your garden area, that would be
10 feet.
10 feet by 10 feet. So 100 square feet, not very big.
Right.
If you have any size yard, you probably could find a 10 by 10.
Okay.
If you did 5 tomato plants, so that's 1 row of tomatoes every 2 feet, each tomato plant will yield about 15 to 20 pounds of food. So at the low end, that's 75 pounds of tomatoes for the summer.
Wow.
And then if you did the same thing with 5 zucchini plants and did 1 row of 5 zucchini plants, that's about 10 pounds of food of zucchini per plant. So that's another 50 pounds of food. And then if you did 1 10-foot row of pole beans, and pole beans go about every 3 inches, you either have to put in a trellis or a piece of fencing or even just some strings or something stretched between 2 poles. There we go, stretched between 2 poles.
Right.
And then they work their way up the strings. A 10-foot row of pole beans will get you about 10 to 15 pounds of beans. And then if you do the potatoes, 1 potato box, which is a 2-foot by 2-foot box filled with dirt, you plant your potatoes in it. As the potatoes start to grow, you keep adding more dirt to it. 1 potato box can easily yield you 30 pounds of potatoes.
Okay.
If well tended, it could easily go upwards of 50, 60, 70 pounds of tomatoes. So easily in a 10 by 10 garden, you could get 160 to 180 pounds of food in a summer. No problem with 4 vegetables.
Are you doing any canning or preserving?
Yes. So I did that for the first time last year. That is really interesting because that's kind of a little bit of a delicate science. You know, you have to make sure you do it right because if you don't, you run the risk of botulism growing in your cans.
Right.
So you got to be really careful that, you know, you find a recipe and you follow that recipe.
Okay, so it's more about a recipe than it is designer containers and finding ways to seal your containers.
Ball jars, that's probably the big company, the big name in glass canning jars. They've been around since the early 1800s, and their design hasn't changed since then.
Do you know anything about the solution that you have to create, the recipe? Do you know anything about that?
So really the recipe is more just following the steps to doing it. You know, whatever it is you're canning, I mean, you can can pickled things, you can can fresh things, you can make tomato sauce, you can do whole tomatoes, you can can beans, you can can peppers, you can can whatever you want. But the important thing is your sanitation, following the sanitation recipe.
Right.
So that's boiling your cans beforehand for the prescribed amount of time. I believe it's 20 minutes. Don't quote me on that. Make sure that you look that up if you go try to do it. But it's about 20 minutes. You have to boil them beforehand to make sure that they're clean before anything goes into it. And then whatever it is that you're canning goes into your vessel, you seal it, and then it goes back into boiling water again. And then that is what makes sure that whatever went into your can, your tomato sauce, your whole tomatoes, your pickled jalapenos, whatever it is, that kills anything, any germs, bacteria, or anything that might have been on the vegetable gets killed once it's inside of the can, and then it's shelf stable.
Right. Okay. Wow. So, you know, to that end, are you building relationships in your community that allows you to essentially put 3 meals on a table a day? Are you providing that much food to your community?
Maybe not quite to that level, but I'm putting some food out there. That's for sure.
Right.
You know, I'm besides the eggs, I'm not doing anything really protein wise at this point. So that's sort of the next step that I'm looking to take, whether that be doing chickens for meat, trying to raise some beef cows, rabbits. You know, there's all sorts of different routes you can go.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I mean, well, there's protein in your beans, right?
Oh, for sure.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. The reason I asked about the square footage and how much food you're getting out of it is because I once read that in a metropolitan area in California, I think the area was Compton, that in some of their backyards, in a, just like you said, approximately 10 by 10 amount of space, they're cranking out a lot of food. And so, you know, the point is that for me, here on America's Next Motivator, is that it's not impossible for us to begin growing our own foods. And so, you know, it seems like the smallest amount of space. In fact, my grandfather used to grow collards and other sorts of greens and beans right alongside his flowers in his front yard and in his backyard. That probably was like a 5 by 5 space.
You don't need a lot of room, and you don't have to jump in with both feet. You can go to the hardware store and buy 1 tomato plant and start with something simple. See if you have the appetite for it. Right. You don't know until you try.
Now, what year did you acquire your farm in?
It would have been spring of 2018.
Okay. All right. Okay. And what did you name it?
So there's actually a little story behind that. So I did not name the farm. I kept the name that was already on the homestead because I thought it had such a rich, deep story to it. So the family that I bought the farm from, their name were the Adamsons.
Okay.
And they were, I hope I get this story right.
Yeah,
they were two teachers for Cincinnati Public back in the 30s and 40s.
Okay.
So they live down in the city. I'm about 25 minutes from downtown Cincinnati, no traffic. So I'm only about 15 miles outside of the city. So at that point, though, this was the sticks. You know, I'm kind of like right on the edge of the suburbs now. But at that point, I mean, this was the country.
Okay.
So they bought this farm. They quit their jobs, bought this farm, and lived 100% off grid, raising all of their own food, and they were basically disconnected from the world. You know, didn't initially have electric here, didn't have running water here initially. Wow. And when they moved out here, they knew that this was old Indian land. Mm-hmm. And so they wrote a letter to the Indian nation for the state of Ohio, and basically explaining, you know, hey, we're the Adamsons. We just bought this piece of property. This is where it's located. We were wondering if you could help us name our farm. And so the name that they sent back to him was Shanyata, Chanyata, Shanyata. Okay. And what that means is basically translates to at the edge of the woods, near the woods, something along those lines. Because my property butts up, like I said, I'm sort of like right at the line between the suburbs and starting to get out to the country. There is a 1,000-acre nature preserve that is right next to me that is owned by the Park District. And It is a completely unmolested forest, never had a timber harvest or anything in it. There are trees back there that are hundreds and hundreds of years old. So I am right at the edge of some real woods, you know, not like the park that's down the street. I mean, some real old growth forest, which is really cool. So that's right. Shanyata is the name that the Indian Nation of Ohio sent back to the Adamson family, and that's what they named the farm. And I wasn't going to come up with anything more clever than that. So I asked them if they minded if I kept the name and ran with it. And, you know, they were kind enough. They signed their LLC over to me that had the name incorporated, and I've been able to keep that name, which has really, really been nice.
So in the event of a scenario where, you know, other people are short on produce, or, you know, they need to be in a space where they can self-sustain, you don't have those problems.
No.
No, you don't have those problems. Do you talk to any of your family members or any of your friends about starting a farm? Do you talk to anybody about this?
Maybe not so much the farm might not be the right word for it. Maybe more along the lines of, you know, a homestead would probably be the better word for it. Lots of my friends show a lot of interest in what I do. They kind of, you know, have some trepidations about, you know, am I allowed to have chickens where I live and that sort of thing? You know, a friend of mine actually, he bought his kids some chickens for Easter and then found out he wasn't allowed to have them where he lived. So
where's he live?
They live in my house. Sharonville. Yeah, in the city limits of Sharonville, you're not allowed to have chickens.
Okay, chickens specifically.
Yep.
All right, but you can have gerbils though. Just checking.
I think so.
Okay. Wow. So we have a question. During this unprecedented time with COVID-19, what precautions are you taking to ensure safety for yourself and your farm?
So at this point, it hasn't really so much been a worry because, well, one, I'm here by myself, sort of in the middle of nowhere. So I don't have to, I've been socially distancing for years. So right. I got that part covered. But I am not to the point yet where I am productive out of my garden yet. So I'm not selling anything yet. I'm not giving anything away yet. That might be a bridge that I have to cross here in a couple of months to make sure that everything is sanitized before I start putting it out into the world. But at this point, I'm not putting anything out there. During maple syrup season, that was kind of pre this all taking off. So I didn't really have that issue come up at that point either. So in that case, I've really been pretty lucky.
Right. So we find that in a natural environment, especially in the summertime, for somebody who's in a remote area like you, it's possible that COVID-19 is not as much of a risk factor.
I wouldn't think so. I mean, I still am. I'm trying to be as cautious as I can.
Right.
You know, my parents aren't old, but they're not young. I am still around my parents. You know, I've got a little young nephew that I see all the time, and so I wash my hands. I'm a mask wearer. When I'm out, I'm putting a mask on. And if I'm going to the grocery store or something, I'm trying to do the right things to make sure that I stay healthy and that the people that I am around stay healthy also.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have to believe that, you know, taking produce from your farm or whatever it is that you're providing there is a little bit safer, if not much safer, than actually going to the grocery store.
I'm 100% organic. I don't use any pesticides. I don't use any man-made fertilizers. I'm 100% organic here.
Right. So you're lucky. I have to tell you, I was in the grocery store today and I'm sick and tired of wearing that mask on my face.
You aren't kidding, man. With glasses, it's awful.
Yeah. And, you know, people, they say hi and how you doing? And I'm just like itching to tell them, like, I wish I could take this mask off my face because, you know, I feel like I'm breathing in my own air. It's the weirdest thing.
I ran into somebody that I knew. They said hi to me and I had to ask them, who are you?
Right. Because you couldn't see their face.
Yeah.
Right. So what particular season are we in now? What season is it?
So I guess we're heading into the productive part of the I guess the right word for it would be my market garden.
Market garden?
Yeah, so that's kind of like the delineation between I used the word monocrops earlier. So okay. Monocropping would be like when you're making that drive from Cincinnati to Columbus and it's just nothing but flattened cornfields for miles and miles and miles. Mm-hmm. That's monocropping. Okay. So what I do is more like a market garden, which is kind of just what it sounds like. I'm raising vegetables for market. So it's a bigger variety. It's at a much smaller scale. You can have a large scale market garden, but that's just not what I have. So we're starting to head into the I guess you could call it the productive season for my market garden.
Right. Now, do you also call it market garden because you intend to sell these items at a market?
I hope so. I had lots of plans about trying to start doing farmers markets this year, but COVID kind of threw a wrench into those things. So I don't know exactly what that's going to look like. You know, I had a super productive maple syrup season. Last year, I produced, I want to say, just under 2 gallons of syrup.
Okay.
And that was from about 120 gallons of sap. And then this year, I ran over 600 gallons of sap, and I had about 18 gallons of syrup that I was hoping to be able to personally take some places. And then there is also a couple of little like permanent farm stands that are relatively close to where I live. I was hoping to be able to take them to those places and be like, hey, would you be interested in putting this on your shelf? This is who I am. This is where I live. But a lot of that stuff just didn't open up when it was supposed to open up. You know, they're opening up now. Everything's starting, whatever the new normal is, it's starting to go back to normal. Mm-hmm. So that didn't really happen. And then there hasn't really been much word on the farmers markets opening back up yet. So with the syrup, I'm sort of sitting on all this stock that I'm hoping to be able to take out with me. And then sort of the same with the vegetables. I'm hoping that at some point I'll be able to go out and do that sort of thing. But I'm starting to kind of work on a plan B of being able to do something here from the farm and have people come here and get it from me.
Right. Wow. Okay. I have to ask you, I know we're in the summertime and I want to discuss hot topics, but when you say that you went from 1 gallon of syrup to dozens more, I want to know what change did you make in order to get that much more syrup?
Everything. I changed everything, Cedric.
Wow. Talk about that.
So the first year, last year, well, calendar 2 years ago, but last season, I made a DIY, my dad and I made a DIY maple syrup boiler out of a file cabinet and a steam tray. And we just cut a hole in the top of a file cabinet, drop a steam tray into it. All you have to do to make maple syrup is you tap the trees, you put in what's called a spile. The tap is called a spile. You put that into the tree, and then you either hang a bucket from it to collect it, or you run a hose to a bucket to collect it. And then you boil it, and you boil it, and you boil it, and you boil it, and you boil it.
Right.
Because coming out of the tree, maple sap is about 1 to 2% sugar. Maple syrup is about 45% sugar. So you have to boil out about 60% of the water out of it. I mean, you just got to boil it and boil it and boil it until as you drive the water out, you're driving the sugar content up.
Okay.
So that's all that maple syrup is. So they said the first year that I did it, I did 9 trees and I did that little DIY syrup burner. I really enjoyed it. I had a great time doing it. I had great reactions from the people that I gave syrup to. Everybody was like, "Oh man, I would pay for this. This is great."
Right.
So then that kind of, started getting the wheels turning, and
right.
I started looking into, how do I come up with, sort of still at a hobby level, but sort of starting to creep more towards a commercial level of doing this.
Yep.
Because, a commercial level, I mean, you're talking tens of thousands of dollars for startup costs, and that just isn't in the cards at this point.
Right.
So I actually I found a guy on Craigslist who makes maple syrup boilers, and he lives up in Dayton. And so I went up and visited this guy, and he's just some old retired welder. And he said somebody asked him one time, hey, showed him a picture, could you make one of these? And he said, I can try. So he said he made one, and whenever he makes something, he said he makes 2. So he made the one for the person he knew, posted the other one on Craigslist, and somebody made him an offer for it that he couldn't believe. So now all of a sudden that's his little side business.
Right.
So I bought the boiler from him. The tray capacity from the little steam tray that I was using was about 1.5 gallons. The tray capacity for the one I'm using this year was just under 30 gallons. So the key for the boiling, man, we're really getting into the weeds with this, Cedric. We're really going deep.
Hey, this is where it's at. Hey, if you just tuned in, we're talking to Stephen Cleary right now. Stephen took it upon himself to start a farm almost by accident, as he says. But, what a great endeavor and what an impactful thing to do, not only for yourself, but for the future generations of your family, quite possibly. And so that's what we're talking about. Stephen is based out of the Cincinnati area, out in the sticks, but he's converting those sticks into a viable farmland. So that's where we are right now. One more question before we go to a brief break. I want to know,
sir.
where do you get your seeds from for the things that you plant?
A few different places. So I like the what's the word I'm looking for? Heirloom. I really like the heirloom seeds. Okay. So a lot of people they don't like, what's the word for it? So an heirloom seed is a seed that has been around for more than 50 years. So it's kind of like a tried and true seed.
Okay.
A lot of people shy away from the word GMO, but if you breed this tomato with this tomato, that's a GMO. You can breed 2 heirlooms, and that's a GMO. So GMO, while it can be a not so good thing,
right,
it doesn't always necessarily have to have that negative connotation of the genetically modified organism.
Okay.
Most of the things that we eat today have been modified at some point.
Right.
You read about, bananas 100 years ago were this big. Mm-hmm. But we have bred bananas to be the size that they are. So technically the bananas that we eat are a genetically modified organism.
Right. Hold it right there. We're going to take a 30-second break. Grab yourself a drink of water, and we'll be right back. And we're back. So, Stephen, talk to me a little bit about the difference between genetically modified organisms and those that you would consider not genetically modified organisms.
So like I was saying, if you have a seed that has not been genetically modified, they refer to that as an heirloom variety.
Okay.
A lot of times, so a genetically modified one could be something as simple as 2 heirloom varieties that have been bred together to create something new. So it doesn't always necessarily have to have that negative connotation. What most people think of when they think of a GMO is like, again, going back to that monocropping thing, like a genetically modified corn, they have the corn varieties that they use to make ethanol. They have modified those so they are resistant to things like Roundup. So they can plant their corn, then they can come through and they can spray their fields. And then that's how large scale agriculture deals with the weed problem. Like we talked about earlier, how that's been my biggest battle in my garden. At a much larger scale, they're not going out there and picking weeds, and they're going out there and they're just hosing the field down with Roundup or something similar.
Okay.
So that's where a lot of the negative connotation for GMO comes from, is those kind of crops that are resistant to things like pesticides and herbicides and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So you kind of have to just do your research a little bit on when you're picking your seeds out. If you see heirloom, everybody sees heirloom and they're like, oh, well, that's what I want. That's what I want. Which, there's nothing wrong with an heirloom variety. You're going to get beautiful vegetables out of both. But that GMO thing isn't always necessarily a bad thing.
Right. Me, myself, I look for the non-GMO sticker on the majority of the things that I buy. Because based off of what I've been listening to and watching, different documentaries out there, such as Food Inc. And then when you listen to other people who grow crops and stuff like that, they talk about GMO foods as foods that don't have the same nutritional content because the genetic structure of that produce or those crops has been changed so that you get a different reaction out of your body.
Right. When you think about, if you're buying something from the grocery store, whoever's growing that most likely was looking for the absolute highest yields possible. It's a business. They're not in it like me, where I'm looking to grow pretty vegetables. They're out there they're just trying to grow as much as they can, as fast as they can, get it on the trucks, get it to the market. So a lot of times with those higher yield things, I think that's where you start to run into, like you were saying about you maybe lose some nutritional value and those sort of things.
For those people who might be interested in starting a garden, what would be the first 3 steps that you'd say they could take?
Well, first you need to decide, do you want to start from seed or do you want to start with like store-bought plants? I would tell you, if you're new and you want to start from seed, buy a couple of store-bought plants. Just to be sure, have a backup plan. Always have a backup plan, because you're not going to get 100% germination. So when you make that decision, then that kind of determines on when you need to get started with things. If you're going to be starting from seed, you got to find somewhere in your house where you have good sunlight. And then that's probably going to start, late February, early March. You'll get your seeds started in the house. And then it's where I live in Cincinnati, we're in what's called Zone 6. Every part of the country, there is a different number for the zone. So the further south you are, the higher the number. So I believe like Florida, Georgia, Alabama, sort of that band, that is Zone 8. Above that, like Tennessee, Missouri, the bottom part of Kentucky, that's Zone 7. I'm up here in Zone 6. Those zones determine when you should plant. So the rule of thumb for Zone 6 is Mother's Day, because that's when your fear of last frost is basically past. You kind of can look at long-range forecasts and get an idea whether or not you're going to be getting another frost, and you can kind of fudge that a little bit one way or the other. But rule of thumb for planting in this part of the country is Mother's Day for starting to take your stuff outside. Okay.
And last thing, third thing.
Oh, and then you got to decide where you're going to plant. So you need to prep your garden area. So organic material is the name of the game. So it's easy for me to come up with things like manure. I've got the chickens. My next door neighbor, he has horses. So manure is great, but it could be something as simple as in the fall, stockpile some leaves, blow them off into the corner of your yard, let them sit, mulch them up with your lawnmower, pile them up in a pile. Straw works. Any kind of organic material is going to help to amend your soil, and that helps with moisture retention. That helps with attracting bugs and stuff. Bugs are not always a bad thing. Some bugs are bad because they're going to eat your vegetables, but you want to attract earthworms because they are what's going to aerate your soil. So come up with where you want your garden area to be, and then you probably are going to want to till it. You can go to Home Depot or Lowe's, something like that. You can rent a tiller for an afternoon for $25-$30. Till your little garden area. And then my last pro tip is put a tarp over it. Before you plant, do your tilling, and then put a tarp over it. And what the tarping does is it warms up the soil for one, and it holds the moisture in. So any grass or weed seeds that were in that soil, it's going to make them sprout because it's going to be warm and it's going to be wet, which is what seeds want to sprout.
Okay.
But after they sprout, that's when they start to need sunlight. So when you have the tarp over it, all of a sudden it's starved of sunlight. So you got all of these weed seeds to sprout. They're starved of sunlight. They all die off. So then if you do that about a month before you're ready to plant, when you pull that tarp off, you will have significantly less issues with the weeds in your garden for the whole season.
Wow. Okay, so what you're talking about is conditioning your soil so that you can get the greatest possible yield out of the seeds that you're planting.
Definitely. And that's not going to be a one-year project. You're not going to go from having just regular topsoil for where you live to having, gangbusters garden soil. It's not an overnight fix. It's something you're going to have to do every year. You're always going to have to be amending, adding to it. If you really wanted to get deep into it, certain plants take up certain nutrients. So, you don't want to plant the same thing in the same spot in your garden every year. Like beans are a big nitrogen feeder. They put nitrogen back into the soil. Mm-hmm. Tomatoes are a big nitrogen eater. Tomatoes suck the nitrogen back out of the soil. So those are the things that you like to rotate back and forth with each other. So if you want to get deep into it, you can really do some research and figure out what kind of compost would work best for what you want to grow, or if you want to add some fertilizer to it. There's nothing wrong with fertilizer. There's nothing wrong with not going 100% organic.
Right. I know some people who they grow fruits and vegetables or just vegetables in their backyard, and whatever they have that's like organic matter, they just throw it out there in the grass.
Right.
Does that work too? I'm talking about like
100%. 100%. Now for me, all that stuff goes, but that would 100% also work going into the garden. So it goes from my scraps go from me to my chickens, goes through my chickens, then that goes to my compost, and then that goes to my garden. So I just have like one extra step in it than what you're describing.
Okay. Now, do you have any books on this topic? I hear you talking about research. Do you have any books on this topic that we could read into, or any people that you follow, maybe on YouTube or somebody that we can look up online and learn more about this?
Some really good YouTube channels to follow. If you're looking for more of like a vlog type thing, where you're going to get a little bit more touchy-feely might not quite be the right word, but you're going to get a little bit more story and everything behind it. Right. There's a great one called Living Traditions Homestead. That's a husband and wife. I believe they're out in Missouri. They have really good information. There's a guy called Justin Rhodes. He's in North Carolina. He has tons and tons of information. He's a really big, probably the biggest homesteading YouTuber that I can think of. But then if you're just looking for straight up facts and info about growing your own food, Hoss Garden Tools, HOSS. They're based out of Southern Georgia, and they put out some of the best information about growing your own food that I have found on the internet. They do a tremendous job, and they're super interactive. If you leave a comment on one of their posts or send them an email, they will get back to you right away. I mean, they are tremendous.
Right. Okay. Again, I think that this is a very important.
Follow Shinyatta Farm on YouTube.
Who?
Shinyatta Farm, me.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Talk about yourself. Come on, man. Hey, don't forget about the plug. Hey,
so I also have a mildly successful YouTube channel that I curate. Right. So you can find me on YouTube, Shinyatta Farm, CHANYATA, and I think the most fun thing about what I do is I show you my successes, but I show you my failures too. Right. It's not all pie in the sky, man. Not everything goes as planned.
To that end, let's see if we could show the people a clip of a little bit of what you do. How about that?
Oh man, sure, go ahead.
Hold on 1 second.
You could hire some significantly smaller problem. Yeah, significantly smaller problem. Now, I may have been a little bit dishonest with you guys, referring to this as my basement. The cellar's probably a little bit more like it. The ceilings are pretty low. When things about it, I kind of like to keep this sort of stuff to myself, but take care of yourself.
My sound.
Yeah, and so yeah,
Oh,
we're
there
back. We're
There
back.
we go.
I think that was, that's just a little taste of what you do over there. And like you said, you have a pretty good channel going on over there on YouTube. What's the name of your YouTube channel?
It is the name of the farm, Chanyata Farm, Chanyata. So as you can see, I'm not very high tech, man. I start my seeds down in my basement under a low fluorescent light. I don't have a greenhouse. I don't have anything special going on. Just some dirt and a light.
Right. Sometimes the most awesome things happen in the most simple of ways. I want people to understand out there that something as simple as growing a farm can make you reliable for your family. It can make you self-sustaining. I'm certainly inspired by your story and the decision that you've made to start a garden. I've been watching you for at least the past 6 or 7 months, and I've been learning from you. I plan at some point in my life to start a garden because of the excellent work that you're doing. I want you to tell people, Stephen, how old you are.
I am 30 years old.
30 years old. And so fairly young man to have made the decision to start a farm. Right? And where are you going with that? What's your plan 10 years from now? Where do you see this endeavor?
I hope that at some point this can become a full-time venture. At this point, I still have a regular full-time job. So this is all, I want to call it part-time, but really it's just a second full-time job. But I would love for this to become my full-time gig at some point.
Right. And do you see it as something for your family members or your general public to get involved in as well?
I would hope so. One of the coolest things with the YouTube channel is all of the people from everywhere that I get to interact with about this stuff. I did not know that I had this passion 2 years ago before I started doing it. I knew I like to work with my hands and I like to stay busy. Those are kind of like probably my two defining traits, maybe you could say. Okay. So I did not know that I was going to find this passion in growing my own food, raising my own animals. I didn't know that was there. So when I started putting it out into the world, I got a YouTube comment earlier today from a guy from Cairo, Egypt. Where am I going to have that sort of interaction from?
Right.
It's been so fun to find like-minded people that both have praise and criticism. Both are great. I'm real accepting of both. The internet is a tremendous tool if you want to use it.
That's one of the things that I want to call attention to as well, is that there are gifts and passions and talents inside of us that are unbeknownst to us. Little do we know that there's something inside of you just waiting to be piqued by a certain interest of what happens in your life. And then you take that tip that, hey, maybe I'll start a farm. And then you take you give it a chance. You get into it and you start, maybe you start with one tomato plant and maybe that leads to a bean pole as well. And the next thing you know, you've created something that you're into. You created something that you're passionate about, and you created something that as you invest in it, it invests back in you. And that is what results in true happiness. And these are the types of messages that we want to get out to our community, is that you have seeds in you that are waiting to sprout. You have seeds in you that are waiting to grow into a manifestation of happiness in your life. For Stephen here, that was a farm, but for you, it could be any of a number of things in the world. And so when you make that investment in yourself, that which you invest in will also make an investment back in you. You know, I talk to a lot of people about happiness and how to find it and how to secure it in your life. A lot of the time, there is something inside of you that you need to peak, that you need to explore and bring out of yourself in order to achieve true happiness. I wanted people to know that I'm not talking to an old man here today. I'm talking to a very young man with a lot of life ahead of him.
You can't be afraid to try. You know, I would tell you I was a pretty listless younger man. You know, in my early to mid 20s, I didn't know what I wanted out of life. You know, coming out of high school, I tried the college thing. You know, everybody told me, hey, you know, you're smart, Steven. College is what you need to do. It's what you need to do. And, you know, college is a tremendous thing. Don't get me wrong. If that's where your passion is, if you have a passion for education in that way, then that's the direction you need to head. But you can't be afraid if you don't think that that's your path to not go that direction. You know, I tried to force a square peg into a round hole for about 3 years.
Yep.
And I don't want to say giving up on it. That's probably not quite the right word for it, but giving up on that and deciding to go out and work hard, basically. You know, if one person had told me as a young man, you know, a 17, 18-year-old kid, hey, Steven, you know, you don't have to go to college. You're just going to have to work hard. I probably would have been willing to accept that challenge.
Right.
So it was those few years coming out of when I decided, okay, the college thing wasn't for me. I didn't know what was for me. And like you were saying about, you know, we all have those seeds and passions inside of us. We might not necessarily know what they are, but unless you try some new things and get out there and, you know, quote unquote, get your hands dirty, you might not find it. So, you know, you can't be afraid to go out there and try new things. I've said it a few times already, but I did not know anything about doing any of this stuff before I moved out here.
And it just came out.
I wanted to do it. I had one way or the other. I gotta do it.
That's the way it happens. It happens organically. Sometimes the best things in life, they happen organically. They come out of the clear blue, and you have to believe in that which comes to your mind, that which comes to your heart. You got to believe in it. You got to take the first step, take the second step, and guess what? A snowball beats snowball. Marcus Thompson says he appreciates your story, Steven, and I want you to know that what you've done is a lesson to other people to step out and do what it is that you have a passion to do. I want you to give us one lesson that you've learned in your journey as a homesteader.
I would say the biggest thing that I've learned, and at this point it's kind of just become second nature, but you have to be able to fail. It's all a part of it. You're going to try to grow something and it's not going to grow. You're going to try to, you know, raise a chicken and it's not going to survive. You know, it's an unfortunate thing, but it's a part of life. I tried to build a shelf one time and then the shelf fell off the wall. I mean, things are going to happen. You got to be ready to fail.
Right.
If you're walking around not trying to get after what you want in life because of a fear of failure, you're probably not going to get those things that you want, whether that's relationships, whether that's goals, whatever that is in your life. If fear is your motivating factor or your demotivating factor, I guess, then you're going to struggle to achieve what you want to achieve.
Right. So you learn a lot of life lessons there on the farm.
100%.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Any last thoughts you want to leave with the people today?
I really appreciate you having me on, man. Like you were saying, you're watching me from afar. I've been watching you from afar for a while, man. This was really great to catch up.
Right.
Long way from those bus rides, they're wrestling meets back in 2005.
Yep. Wrestling. And, you know, we learned so many lessons along the way. You never know. You know, when somebody says to you, what are you going to be when you're in high school? You just haven't the slightest idea a lot of the time. And life just gets more and more interesting the older we get.
100%.
I'm proud of you, Steven. I want to let you know while you're still alive and while you're here with us and vibrant that you are doing a great thing. I want to pay you your respect. I want to let you know that what you're doing is something that other people can model themselves after. You were brave because you took it upon yourself to step out on an idea that you have, and now you live there, and now you are reliable, you are sustainable, and you have chosen to be a success. You know, success is a choice, and you've made that choice today. You, my friend, are America's next motivator. You know
I
what
appreciate
I mean?
that. I appreciate that.
Without a doubt. I look forward to having a conversation with you in the future. And I also look forward to you dropping information for us as time goes on. I want you to, in the comment box after this episode, I want you to put down there those people that you said had great tips and things like that on YouTube. Drop those in the comment box. Also,
sure.
Drop your farm in the comment box, because for people out there in the Cincinnati area or tourists out there in the Cincinnati area, I think that you've got something to provide, and I think that we need to invest in you for sure. I watch a traveling food show. I was a huge fan of Anthony Bourdain. I was a huge fan of Andrew Zimmern, and now I'm a real big fan of this guy named Phil. He has this show on Netflix called Somebody Feed Phil. One of his favorite restaurants is on a farm in New York, and it's a place where they take those homegrown produce and meat items and they create the most eloquent dishes out of them. Do you ever plan to start a restaurant or anything like that?
Maybe not personally, but at a certain point, I'd love to try to be able to get hooked up with somebody like that. Mm-hmm. Sort of on my short list of goals is to start getting into what they call a CSA. That's sort of a smaller scale version of, if you've heard of like Green Bean Delivery or those kind of places where, you get a weekly package sent to your house. Mm-hmm. And then with those, it's more like targeted towards like a recipe, but with a CSA, it's more targeted towards this is what we had on the farm this week.
Okay.
We had tomatoes, we had, whatever vegetables were going, in the spring, you might get a jar of maple syrup, you might get a bottle of honey. So my goal that I've sort of been working, that I'm hoping to get to next year, probably more likely the year after, is to get to the point where I have the sustainability of having enough produce, enough of the year that I can start to do something like that, or even get hooked up with a restaurant or something, small scale like that too.
Mm-hmm. Real quick.
Yes, sir.
What is survival to you?
Personally, surviving, you would kind of brings like a baseline sort of thing, sort of idea to you. Mm-hmm. But I would say to me, I'm always trying to strive for a little bit more than that.
There you go. There you go.
So I'm not looking for the baseline.
What is success to you?
Making my family proud, making my friends proud, supporting my community, continuing to work with the kids that I work with through the school district that I work for, and just showing support and receiving support.
What is greatness to you?
Being happy with yourself, being able to look yourself in the mirror and know that you're doing the right things.
There you have it. Welcome to the Pride Empowerment Network, everybody. We got America's Next Motivator right here, Stephen Cleary, Chanyata's Farms. Get in touch with this guy. We'll see you guys next time. We're closing out the week, and we'll see you guys back here Monday on America's Next Motivator. So long.